But this time in Taiwan, I found one new thing that is, no, as a Taiwanese, I've never seen it in the past. Maybe just take it for granted.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of BaisWave's Global Vase podcast. Today, we're at the Beehive studio, and we have the privilege of hosting Yung Lin to discuss Taiwan's sovereignty and international relations. Born in Taiwan, Yung Lin is currently a lecturer at Leiden University's Faculty of Humanities and a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Governance and Global Affairs, whose PhD dissertation examines how educational and cultural exchange, media communication, and international cooperation have shaped Taiwan's relations with other countries in Southeast Asia. With Ms. Lin's insights into Taiwan's national unity and identity, we're going to explore Taiwan's independence from the perspective of the nation's own citizens and domestic policies. Thank you for tuning in.
You are now tuning into BaisWave.
What do you think are some of the other factors that can contribute to solving the conflict between China and Taiwan regarding the status of Taiwan?
Well, that's what I've been working on for the past 10 years since I started this academic journey. I think the main mission is I wouldn't like to see the conflict resolution to be only about war. And I see all other approaches that can prevent us from sending people to wars, then these are good solutions. Because starting a war, then that's really a great cost to the economy and also to people's lives. A new concept I've been promoting or researching on is human security. I wouldn't like to use the word national security because I found some wars that when they wage war, then usually the reason is for protecting national security, or if anything that is for the nation's interest, then they can start this. That is not really concerning for people's lives. And it's not just lives, it's also living in dignity. So I would like to see it more from the perspective of human security, that if we have other approaches that can prevent from sending people to wars, then that is protecting human security. And that can be trading more or allowing more spaces for setting up emerging companies, for young people starting their enterprises, rather than sending young people to wars, or inviting young students to diplomatic activities. I made this example is because that's what I've seen in Taiwan's policy documents, that I think it's around, since 2014, there are a lot of campaigns inviting young people to join diplomatic activities. So these, I've seen them as organic approaches. They are conflict resolution. Not to start a war, but to keep the discussion of Taiwan's position, a China factor, on dialogues. We keep telling stories to younger generations. And if we can change the story to less conflictual, but more peaceful thinking. So I would see all of these, at least that they're not sending people to war, but think about this story carefully.
Okay. Then, with regards to your recent field trips to Singapore and Malaysia, could you firstly explain why you took those trips and chose those locations in particular? Then can you also tell us what your biggest takeaway from those trips was?
Oh, sure. Okay, that's quite a jump. But I would say that still it's a continuous move from my PhD project. In my PhD project, I recruited many Taiwanese expats, and they're very generous, sharing with me their life story in Southeast Asia. And a lot of these respondents were sharing their stories from Singapore and Malaysia. So that's why it sparked me that, maybe this time, as I completed this project, then I would visit them and to experience this, what they've mentioned, crossing the border from Singapore to Malaysia, that what's it like. And in this process, when Singapore to Malaysia, this time when I was there, I took only the train. That was only 5 minutes. But for a 5 minutes train, you have to get there early, like 40 minutes in advance. Overall, if that's not seem a lot, but it's a lot for people working there if they have to commute and crossing the borders. So I want to experience it in person and to evaluate this impact on the people working there. So those are the motivations. I traveled to Singapore and Malaysia this time.
And your biggest takeaway from the trip?
In addition to visit these respondents, my biggest takeaway is just fascinated by this border check. Made me wonder and think again about these border governance, that in the discussions of sovereignties, what is a sovereign country, they are enacted in border checks. Leaving the Singapore and entering Malaysia, then you need to pass two customs.
Wow.
So that is where they ask questions and ask why do you come here and why do you leave, and that's where they see sovereignties is enacted. So that's my biggest takeaway. Just want to experience it in person.
Then in the Substack story you wrote about your interview with a Taiwanese living in Singapore, you emphasized that the reason why your interviewee moved to Singapore was to escape the small job market in Taiwan. Would you say that Taiwan is currently suffering from a massive brain drain, as an article from Time magazine actually described the movement of Taiwanese people to China to earn a higher salary in 2017? If so, what do you think Taiwan can do to keep its skilled, highly educated citizens in Taiwan?
I've been writing these stories on Substack. Mainly that my goal is to turn these academic findings into more public-facing ones, maybe to invite people to think about these concepts again. Back to the question. So if I remember, that respondent, she said she thinks Taiwan's job market is small. But I think it's relative in terms of whom and looking at what. And for that respondent, she is very talented, very multilingual. I think that's why that gives her access to a bigger world out there. That because she's seen out there that there's a bigger job market, so that's why she would see Taiwan's job market small. But this time during winter, in addition to Singapore and Malaysia, I also went back to Taiwan and visited some friends who stayed in Taiwan for some time. Now, from their perspective, I wouldn't say job market is small, but I do see a trend that because AI and these technological advancement, the job market has been a bit more monotonous, that more emphasis on technology. If you learn by coding, or if your bachelor degrees from the STEM area, science, technology, all these areas. So that's a concern that maybe it's not getting small, but it's getting a bit squeezed out to focus on only certain sectors.
But I think that's a general trend for every other country in the world as well, right? AI and its effects on the workforce.
I think so. Yeah. But I think in Taiwan, that there's another variable. The founder of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, then he's going to turn Taiwan or put a headquarter in Taiwan. So that not only impacts on the job market, but I would say to the education system, to real estate market there, overall to Taiwan, I think that's a huge impact.
In the story, you also describe Singapore as a living site for observing how languages and identities co-live without always demanding a resolution. If we compare this with Taiwan's linguistic landscape, how would you characterize the Taiwanese government's linguistic policies and planning? And how do you think they affect Taiwanese identity?
Thank you for reading my Substack story.
No worries.
I really try to make these stories more lived, more lively, that less academic. That it's not just study about identity and security, but there are languages in these arena that we can see their impact. I find in Singapore the languages spoken or used or heard are really much more multiplied than in Taiwan. But this time in Taiwan, I found one new thing that is, as a Taiwanese, I've never seen it in the past, maybe just take it for granted. In my schooling years of elementary school to middle school, at least from these two stages, we have courses mostly taught in Mandarin, but there's also a very, very small proportion of the language course in Taiwanese, the local Taiwanese languages, and Hakka, but then it was removed, so not a lot. And the languages of Taiwanese and Hakka, they were actually in our laws. And these regulations that Taiwan will protect the Hakka speakers, the Taiwanese speakers. However, Taiwanese speakers are much more prevalent, seen everywhere, and Hakka is less and less. But it doesn't mean that there's no protection or emphasis on these language using. There is one TV channel speaking Hakka, and there are also a lot of museums trying to preserve the Hakka speaking culture. But in Singapore, maybe it's my limited access to local amenities. I'm not sure if that's in the law to protect this, but at least I remember an exhibition in Taiwan saying that the Hakka speakers found a place to preserve their language legacy. Because in Taiwan, that this is institutionalized in laws, that on the metro, on the train, the announcements of these train stops will not just be in Mandarin or Taiwanese, but also in Hakka.
Mm-hmm. So you would say that language has a big impact on Taiwanese society?
I think it is. I think language also is very useful in promoting identity. Oh, that we're different and we embrace different language speakers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I have one last question left. Do you have any predictions for Taiwan's future? This could be an economic prediction, social prediction, or a political prediction.
I would say maybe not prediction, but I do have a strong hope, hoping that Taiwan can be a safer place. I would say safer in society, that these lived experiences, they can be safer in terms of like just living in a city. This is another thing that this time went back to Taiwan and then to Singapore, Malaysia, and noticed individuals' sense of security and safety in the city are very much structured by the cityscape, the infrastructure. And I think in Taiwan, of course, that for the bigger environment, it's the China factor and the security in the region of Indo-Pacific. But I'd like to start something from very small, that just in the society, just in the city, if we feel safe walking, if we feel safe driving or commuting to work, I think there's still room for making some changes.
Okay.
I grew up in Taipei, and Taipei used to be less safe for pedestrians, but certainly that over 20 years, there have been made more pedestrian walks, not like in Netherlands, they have specific walks. I noticed in Taiwan this time that there are a lot of sidewalks painted in green. Okay, but these are not separated from the car driving road. They're just painted. And many other cities in Taiwan, like in southern cities in Kaohsiung, the other capital city, there are also these painted sidewalks. There are also the cycle lanes being established. So these are all good progress that we've seen for protecting citizens and their safety. So if we can start from this, that would be a very ideal, ideal prediction for Taiwan, protecting more the sense of security. And that's what I've been researching on for human security.
Okay, well, Ms. Lin, thank you very much for this interview, and we hope to see you another time as well, if possible.
No problem. Yeah, thank you
very
much.
much.
Thank you.